Nauru agrees to take former immigration detainees released after a prolonged High Court battle.
When they're found to not be eligible for a visa under Australian law, they should leave.
The federal government to impose a 2-year ban on foreign investors buying Australian homes. A new YouGov poll puts Peter Dutton in the box seat to become Australia's next Prime Minister.
People are ready for a change, and people do want to get their lives and their country back on track.
Remote towns in WA's northwest underwater as cyclone recovery efforts get underway. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm David Chau. We're taking you live now to Sydney, where the Minister for Transport is giving an update on the rail dispute and train services.
A stop to this industrial action. This negotiation's been going on for 10 months. The government view is it's time to stop that industrial action, the impact it's having on commuters and businesses, and allow the parties to sort through the final details on this deal and come to a landing. That's what's required. That's the case we'll be putting on Wednesday to a full bench of the Fair Work Commission. So that's an important next step. I do want to acknowledge the Commission ruling today. The Commission took the view that industrial action was decreasing. While there's some truth to that, we've still seen many staff off work over the weekend, but the impacts on the network because of weekend scheduling have been less. While that's good news, the government fear is this, that industrial action could increase. As more commuters are on the network, we will see increased impacts on commuters. We won't hesitate to file again that application that was dealt with today, if that is the case. If industrial action increases, impacts increase. We'll go back to the Commission any opportunity we believe there's a chance to protect commuters. That's the principle that the government's now following in this dispute. This dispute over time has been about a range of things. At one point it was about running trains 24 hours a day, and another point it was about free fares. Now it's about a $4,500 sign-on bonus. We can't afford bells and whistles here. What we can offer is fair pay and conditions in line with what the government has settled with other workers, what it would like to offer to other workers across the public service. That's what's on offer here, but there's not the chance here to settle for bells and whistles, a raft of demands, but we are really focused here on fair pay and conditions for rail workers. They're under pressure too. We can understand why they need that, but the government can't move on a series of other claims that don't relate to that. Finally, there's no blank cheque here. We can't sign a blank cheque to settle this dispute. If we did, there'd be another demand in 6 months' time. We'd be back here again explaining why another demand was bringing the rail network to a halt. So there's no blank cheque. We need to settle this fairly. The government will work to protect consumers. We're prepared to use the Commission to do that. That key hearing on Wednesday is a really important step in that process. I'll hand now to Matt for an operational update.
Thank you, Minister. Performance on the rail network over the weekend. Yesterday, on Saturday, we saw more than 500 services delayed or cancelled across the rail network. That was an improvement on the performance from Friday, but certainly did create and continue to create impacts for passengers throughout the day on Saturday. The good news is that today we've got a normal service operating. Minor delays as a result of some track work in the west from Granville through to Lidcombe, but we are seeing a good service across the rail network today at this stage, although we do have around 260 of our train crew absent from duty again today. So we're operating a smaller timetable given that it's a Sunday, but the service quality at the moment, we're only seeing some very minor delays across the network. That does highlight the unpredictable nature of this industrial action. While this action continues, we will continue to see unpredictable delays and cancellations day by day, depending on the amount of train crew absent from duty each day. I want to be very clear, there is no lockout in place. Sydney Trains has not locked any of our staff out of the workplace. We are encouraging and continue to encourage all of our rostered staff to please report for duty undertake your normal duties. We'll be operating and planning for a normal timetable throughout the week, but we do expect that there will be delays and cancellations on Monday, and those delays could be quite unpredictable. It will be dependent on how many staff report for duty. We'll be doing everything we can through the Rail Operations Centre to manage those delays live. But as we saw on Friday, our network, we operate 3,200 services each weekday across Sydney. When we have significant staff absence, it creates major issues in our scheduling and in the operation of our services. That's what we saw occurred on Friday. We're encouraging all of our passengers that rely on the network, plan ahead, use the journey planner, think about other modes of transport if you do need to travel throughout Sydney on Monday, as the performance of our network on the rail network could continue to be unpredictable. We'll provide updates in the early morning tomorrow, depending on the staff that are absent from duty, and we'll be managing the network in real time from the Rail Operations Centre. I'll now hand to the Transport Secretary, Josh Murray.
Thanks, Matt. Good morning, everyone. First of all, we'd just like to apologise to commuters across Sydney. Sunday nights can be tough enough in preparing for the working week without thinking about the uncertainty of how you're going to get to work and how long it's going to take. So we apologise for that. And across transport, we'll be doing everything possible to make services as smooth as we can. But the reality is there is no guarantees tomorrow morning. And as we look towards the next Fair Work Commission hearing on Wednesday, we wanted to have these matters heard faster, but that's not possible under the scenario. We will be going before a full bench of the Commission on Wednesday, but we are asking commuters, listen to the news, check your apps, plan ahead, make sure that you are factoring in that there could be these disruptions during this week, and we'll be doing everything possible to look after passengers. And that's why we've taken every step along the way, multiple hearings in the Fair Work Commission, to ensure that we get the best approach for commuters. We have been largely successful. Today we saw the Commission unable to rule in our favour on that matter because they were looking for more of a pattern of behaviour. Well, we don't have the luxury of time. We need to give commuters the most information possible, and what we're saying for this week is please plan ahead, work with us, and we apologise for the disruption that we are likely to see. If we take ourselves back to last Thursday, we had the rail union say that the deal was done, that it was absolutely on the table to be signed. And then we saw this last-minute $4,500 bonus claim that would cost the state $67 million. Now, we just can't have these ambit claims thrown in at the end, take the whole system off track and make commuters pay once again. If the union is serious that they were that close to doing a deal with the fair and comprehensive package that was on the table, well, let's get back to it. Put the industrial action to the side, take commuters out of the firing line, and let's have those discussions that round out the package. We know the workforce doesn't want to be in the middle of this. Commuters certainly don't want to be in the middle of this, and they expect better. So let's sort that out, get back to that package, which we were this close to doing a deal on. Thanks.
Call in sick again. What powers do you have? What can you do to prevent that or to deal with it?
Look, on any normal day, we do have obviously staff that are absent from duty, staff that are sick. We have standby arrangements in place. We roster additional staff at each of our depots to cover those shifts. What we saw on Friday was an unprecedented level of sick leave. And in those circumstances, it's very difficult to plan ahead because we just don't know depot by depot where we'll see those staff absences. Thankfully, we've seen some improvement over the weekend, but it is unpredictable.
And earlier, that was the New South Wales Transport Minister John Graham giving an update on the industrial action taken by railway workers. So 260 train crew were absent from duty again today, causing delays on the train network in New South Wales and Sydney. So there'll be unpredictable delays, they say, and cancellations day by day, depending on the amount of train crew that are absent from duty again each day. So they've essentially urged commuters to consider other forms of transport to get to work and wherever else they need to go from tomorrow onwards. So potentially the next breakthrough could happen on Wednesday when the Union and New South Wales government appear before the Fair Work Commission again. So this comes after the New South Wales government lost its bid to stop industrial action taken by members of the Rail, Tram and Bus Union. So the background for this, the New South Wales government took that union to the Fair Work Commission after what I call an unprecedented number of rail employees calling in sick on Friday. So they claimed that was unprotected, unlawful industrial action. But today in a hearing, the Fair Work Commission dismissed the government claims that it was unlawful, unprotected industrial action. So commuters in Sydney and New South Wales should expect some delays over the next few days and consider alternative forms of transport. Now, in other news, the government of Nauru has agreed to settle members of the NZYQ cohort. The group of non-citizens, some of them with criminal histories, was released from immigration detention following a High Court order back in late 2023. The Home Affairs Minister, Tony Burke, held a press conference a short time ago to explain the details.
Yesterday, Nauru issued 3 30-year visas for members of this cohort. All 3 people are people who have failed the character test, and as a result were on what's called a bridging visa R, a removal pending visa, a BVR. The issuing of those Nauruan visas immediately cancelled by law the visa that they were on, and as a result there was an obligation on my officials to take them into detention. Overnight, officers of the Australian Border Force have detained all 3, and all 3 are now in immigration detention. They will be put on a plane and sent to Nauru as soon as arrangements are able to be made. That will not be within the next 7 days, but it will be as soon as possible. I want to thank the Australian Border Force for their professionalism and the work that they've done overnight and the work that they do every day. I send a reminder that when people commit a crime, generally those crimes are dealt with by state enforcement, and the punishment for the crime is the criminal penalty that goes forward. Separate to that, in running an immigration system, we have to have a character test, and we have to decide whether it's reasonable for someone to have a visa in Australia. As Australia's Immigration Minister, I don't have unlimited places for people. And there are many good people who want to come to Australia who don't get visas. When somebody has come and treated Australians in a way that is shown appalling character, their visas do get cancelled, and when their visas are cancelled, they should leave.
The federal government will ban foreign investors from buying existing homes for at least 2 years in an attempt to boost housing supply for locals. Our political reporter Evelyn Manfield has more.
This is a 2-year ban on foreign buyers from being able to purchase existing homes here in Australia. It'll take effect from the 1st of April, and included in that ban will also be foreign-owned companies and temporary residents. Now, making the announcement of this ban this morning, Housing Minister Claire O'Neill said that in the 2022-23 financial year, foreign buyers purchased around 1,800 existing homes. So she says this should free up homes in the small thousands for local residents.
We've got about 1,800, a bit over 1,800 properties between 2022 and 2023 that were bought by foreign buyers. Over a 2-year period, we're going to free up, effectively twice that for Australians to get into home ownership.
Now, Claire O'Neill admits this isn't a silver bullet by any means, but it's part of a suite of measures the federal government is putting forward to try and fix the housing crisis in Australia. Now, we know the coalition has previously announced announced the same policy. Peter Dutton, the opposition leader, did so during his budget reply speech last year. So there is now agreement on this policy around banning foreign buyers from purchasing existing homes here in Australia. As both parties know, housing will continue to be a major issue heading into the federal election. It's obviously something on the minds of many Australians right around the country, but both parties do have different policies in terms of housing outside of this ban. We know that Labor is focused on unlocking more houses and building more houses through providing payments to the states and territories to boost supply, whereas on the coalition side, they want first home buyers to be able to access their superannuation to be able to get into the housing market. And we know too that they're focused on building infrastructure, so things like sewerage in outer suburban areas, so those areas can become livable to be able to build homes.
For more on this announcement by the federal government, let's bring in economist Saul Eslake, who's based in Hobart. Hi there, Saul. What are your thoughts about these restrictions on foreigners buying Australian property? Is it good policy?
Well, it won't hurt. As Minister O'Neill was just saying, in recent years, foreign investors have purchased about 1,800 established properties in any given year. Now, we know that in the 2023-24 financial year, there were about 5,600 transfers of established properties from one Australian to another. So this represents 0.3% of the volume of transactions in established housing. In other words, as Minister O'Neill says, it will reduce the demand from those for established homes, thus creating opportunities for up to 2,000 Australians to buy homes who might otherwise not have been able to. But it's pretty small beer in the grand scheme of things. There may be more significance attached to the government's proposal to ban temporary residents in Australia, people on temporary visas and the like, from purchasing established properties. Now, we know from the 2021 census that there were about 1.6 million people living in Australia on temporary visas. What we don't know is how many of them are buying established properties. I suspect it's not very much, but it's probably more than the number of foreign investors who are buying established properties. So that may also work to reduce the competition that aspiring Australian first home buyers face in seeking to realise their dreams, to get that first foot on the housing ladder.
Okay, so I'm getting the feeling that it won't have a huge impact on fixing housing affordability. So similar kinds of policies have been introduced by governments in other countries. Do you think they've been effective when it comes to improving housing affordability?
Well, it's not obvious that they have been. There are some countries like China, for example, which completely ban foreigners and non-citizens from purchasing housing or land in China under any circumstances. If you look at countries that, like Australia, do attract lots of foreign investment and lots of migrants from overseas, such as Canada and New Zealand, their housing affordability problems are almost as bad, or in Canada's case, worse than ours, and they have had some restrictions on foreigners buying residential property in those countries for some time. So if they have an impact at all, the impact is likely to be at the margin. As Minister O'Neill said, this is not a silver bullet. It's certainly not that. I describe it as more cosmetic than substantive, but it, from the government's point of view, neutralises a contest with the opposition over that particular aspect of housing policy.
So I'm interested in your thoughts on this. So if politicians were serious about fixing the housing affordability crisis and looking beyond just cosmetic measures, the policies they'd need to announce wouldn't exactly win them an election, would they?
Well, no, and that's the point. I mean, I've said in this context before that if the government was serious about reducing the competition that would be first home buyers face in seeking to realise their dreams, they might want to reduce the number of properties, that established properties in particular, that are bought by Australian investors as distinct from foreign investors. Now, we know that in the 2023-24 financial year, banks and other lenders made finance commitments to over 140,000 Australian investors to purchase established homes, whereas foreign investors, when they buy homes, only about 30% of them are purchasers of established homes. Most of them are purchasers of new homes, which at least adds to the supply of housing, whether for rent or for ownership, whereas close to 80% in 2023-24 of domestic investors bought established properties, that is, properties that already exist as opposed to new ones. And although they like to say to themselves and to others that by purchasing established properties, they're adding to the supply of housing, well, they're also doing it exactly the same time as increasing the demand for rental housing by outbidding would-be home buyers who'd be living in it themselves. But of course, both sides of politics know, and especially the Labor Party after the 2019 election, that there are between 2 and 3 million Australian voters who already own at least one investment property, and they'd probably be, that's more of them who'd be annoyed by having, for example, their tax breaks reduced or eliminated altogether, whereas in any given year there are only about 100,000 Australians who succeed in becoming first home buyers. So there's a pretty clear imbalance of votes in favour of allowing Australian investors to continue to outbid aspiring home buyers, and not too many votes in the other direction. Politicians don't usually say that in public, but they certainly know it.
Well, we're glad to have you on board to, tell us how it really is, Sol. Sol, thank you very much for your insights. Really appreciate it.
That's a pleasure. Thanks for having me, David.
Now, Peter Dutton is in a strong position to become the next Prime Minister, according to a new poll from YouGov published this morning. YouGov's new MRP model found the coalition would win a central estimate of 73 seats if an election were to be held today. Now, that's just shy of a majority. Our elections analyst Casey Briggs takes us through the numbers.
This is a big piece of research, 40,689 interviews fielded over the last few weeks by YouGov. And here are the primary vote shares those interviews have resulted in. If an election were held tomorrow, the YouGov organisation thinks Labor would win about 29.1% of the vote. That would be their lowest primary vote since the 1930s. The LNP would be up since the last election to 37.4%, and third parties and independents would win just over a third of the vote. That would be an increase on their record share in the last election. In two-party preferred terms, it's roughly a 3.2% swing toward the coalition, the LNP sitting at about 51.1% of the vote, and that is roughly in line with other opinion polling that's been published recently. But YouGov have then taken those 40,000 interviews and run them through a statistical model of the 150 electorates. They're trying to work out not just these numbers, but how many seats would each party win were an election to be held today. And here is their central estimate. They think if an election were held today, the Peter Dutton-led coalition would win 73 seats on average. Labor would win 66. 73 is only just shy of the 76 you'd need for majority. So if those were the kinds of numbers you'd see on election day, Peter Dutton would be the firm favourite to move into the lodge. Anthony Albanese would need to cobble together support from nearly every crossbencher in order to continue to govern. Indeed, that seems to be the view of Peter Dutton. Here's what he said on Sky News Australia this morning.
It would be unusual that if we were able to achieve 72 and we were a number of seats ahead of the Labor Party, that there wouldn't be a guarantee of supply and confidence from the crossbench.
Of course, these numbers, they're just estimates, and that 73 for the coalition, that's the central estimate within a range between 65 and 80. So there is considerable uncertainty here. And what's really interesting is watching where the seats are most likely to change, because the coalition appear to be outperforming what you'd expect from a national swing of 3.2%. They're getting larger swings in seats held by the government. Here are the seats on the map that are most likely to shift according to this YouGov model. In the west, 2 seats. The seat of Tangney in Perth would flip back to the coalition if these results were to play out on election day, as well as the new seat of Bullwinkle. But Labor would keep most of the seats that it gained in the west 3 years ago. In Melbourne, there's 2 seats particularly in play here in this model. Chisholm would flip to the Coalition, and the seat of McEwen would be a very close battle, but YouGov thinks the Coalition is ahead in Melbourne's north. But most of the seats flipping in this model are in New South Wales. First, the seats of Eden Monaro and Gilmore to the east of Canberra. And then in Greater Sydney, look at this, 3 of the 4 seats in the Hunter region, the seat of Robertson and Macquarie closer to Sydney as well. It's easy to fixate on single seats in these sorts of models, but the pattern is what we should really pay the most attention to here. And the pattern is really clear. There is a lot of action happening in the outer reaches of our greater capital cities, urban fringes and semi-rural areas. There is much less happening in the inner cities. This has been the focus of the campaigns for some time now. Expect it to continue to be the focus as the election rapidly approaches.
Remote towns in northwest WA have been left underwater after ex-tropical cyclone Zelia brought heavy rain and damaging winds to the region. The weather system is now losing strength as the tropical low moves further inland. Our very own meteorologist Nate Byrne joins us now from Port Hedland. Hi again, Nate. What's the latest on the ground?
G'day, David. I'm now at the Hedland SES headquarters, where actually teams have just scrambled to get out and get into the surrounding communities around Port Hedland because the situation on the ground is still very much a dangerous one. The teams here, supported by crews from Perth, the urban search and rescue trucks you can see behind me, actually were part of the first convoy through on the road from Roebourne to Port Hedland. I was there as they opened that road, and then these guys managed to make it in, and I got some horns tooting, I should say, as they came through, ready to come and start their work. It's really sensitive work in this region. Of course, there's a lot of small Indigenous communities, the cultural aspects that need to be taken care of. The main focus right now is the community, or is the station at De Grey. The De Grey River opening is just to the east of where Zelia made landfall, and that's what got the brunt of that storm. We know there are damaged buildings. The flooded road between here and De Grey seems to have stabilised for now, a little bit under 10 metres, but the water coming in from the tributaries around Marble Bar, where we've had major flooding, all of that now receding. It's receding there because it's piling into De Grey. So we're keeping a very close eye on the situation there to see if there are further river rises, but talking to the SES around here, it could be days or longer before we can get into that area there. So it's one to watch very carefully, David. I'm on the ground doing that for you as long as I can.
Nate, thank you very much for bringing us the latest, and stay safe. Fire authorities are urging Tasmanians on the west coast to remain alert, warning weather conditions can change very erratically. Emergency crews are still battling 3 major blazes on the Canning Peak, Mount Donaldson and Yellowband Plain areas. Although cooler temperatures and rainfall have brought some relief for firefighters, emergency crews are preparing for more hot weather next week. A man is in a serious condition in hospital after a police shooting in the New South Wales Hunter region. Police were responding to a welfare concern call in the Newcastle suburb of Mayfield when a man in his 40s allegedly rushed at them, armed with a meat cleaver. Police deployed a taser before shooting the man. Paramedics later took him to John Hunter Hospital. A critical incident investigation is underway. And this is where viewers on ABC TV will leave us. You can, of course, keep up to date with all the latest news over on the ABC News channel.